Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, and I'm happy to be talking about these things that I do on campus. Most of my classes involve moving students out of the rooms that we have in drama. We don't have too many. I sort of joke at, well, this is engineering. No, this is environment 3 that we're in. Drama is like 0.2, I think, if you were to kind of identify us by parts of buildings. So we have a little room in Haggie Hall, and otherwise we make use, like many other departments, of spaces here and there. So part of it is about moving out of these spaces to make more room. And part of it is also, I'm a site-specific and environmental theater creator, so I obviously get inspired by environments and like to create theater that is reading these environments in various ways. So I've got photographs of a particular group of assignments that come from an intermediate drama class, Drama 222. It's a physical theater class, and it's called Bodyscapes. And I'm just going to keep them playing. So I hope they're not overly too distracting, but I'll just keep them playing, and we'll just have these photographs ongoing that I hope in some way will help illustrate what I'm talking about. Okay, so the University of Waterloo's drama program that I've been a part of for about 10 years is a liberal arts program. And in post-secondary theater training, it's important to know that that's a distinction from a conservatory program. Conservatory programs are the kind of thing that exists at Ryerson, Humber, Sheridan, George Brown, the National Theatre School, where really it's about training people to create theater, I think, in the way that plumbers or electricians are trained. So it's really about skills, and the word training gets used a lot. I've worked in those institutions out west. I worked at the University of Alberta and the University of Regina, which are universities that have conservatory programs. Waterloo is different because as a liberal arts program, we're trying to educate our students about how to make theater. Like, we're giving them skills about acting and directing and design and dramaturgy. The practice is really important to us. But we're also getting our students to think about why they make theater and where they make theater. And how they make it becomes then a kind of matter of interdisciplinary exchange, because when I think about why we do things, my perspective of things just expands to the bigger sense of what the institution is. So I teach students how to create theater and performance, but I also get them to be scholarly and thoughtful about the why, the where, and how they're doing what they're doing. One way of describing what I do is dramaturgy, and it has a Greek origin. It means the work of the actions. And I think that's probably the best way to describe what dramaturgy is. Although in practice, the dramaturg is the person that does the research for the production, the person that acts as a kind of liminal go-between actors, directors, designers, the person so helps communication in a company. Dramaturgs are also about their important work in terms of outreach and connecting to a community and a theater's connection to the community. But for me, dramaturgy is really thinking about how all of these are actions, and they have multiple contexts, and you can look at them in the way that actions have effect and have impact. You can look at them in all kinds of broad interdisciplinary ways. The performance you're looking at right here is done in the South Campus Hall, a tunnel, the tunnel that goes from South Campus Hall to Arts Lecture, which I just love because to me it looks like a set part of the set from Clockwork Orange. And I don't think it gets enough attention on any of the campus communication, because I think it's a really interesting space. And it's a scary space, but it's also a pretty playful space. And it has amazing acoustics. So you can be in that space and find that it's pretty playful if you're not scared by it. And if you're scared by it, go down there with a bunch of people and make noises, because it's a great space to do that. These students are part of a class called, as I mentioned earlier, Drama 222, or I title it Bodyscapes. And there are 3 assignments in this class. The first one is a physical dialogue, where students are creating a relationship between 2 characters that they've developed anywhere on campus. And the relationship is played out using physical means only. So there's a gestural language, which is, there's 10 words in that language to do with hand to face, hand to your shoulders, hug, kiss, turn, things like that. There's sticks used in that work, and that physical theater comes from the Peking Opera. And I learned it from a Romanian named Andrei Serban, who teaches at Columbia. And the third language is contact improv. And contact improv is, again, a kind of language of physical interaction that has to do with sharing center of gravity and taking the weight from your partner. So you find that there's all kinds of interesting intimacies and vulnerabilities explored in contact improv that aren't sexual. And for my students, that becomes a kind of liberating idea, that they can actually be intimate with people through their bodies, but it isn't about sex. And so going through that workshop, and I bring in a contact improv expert called Tanya Williams, who works in the community. They learn how to create this relationship that explores identity in interesting ways. So that's the first exercise. The other exercise they do is a clown exercise, and clown is defined in the way that I create clown as innocence after experience. So it's really a way of tapping into impulses that my students have had as children, but have been kind of educated away from as they've started to become intellectual beings. And clown is childlike, but in the way that clown is resonant with experience, there's also aspects of failure to that, and being present with failure. So that's the second assignment. The assignment that you're looking at here is a mask exercise that they do. And the masks are created off of their own faces. We create a matrix or a mother mold off of their own faces. And then they get the contours through different exercises that are really just about spontaneity. So we'll take large pieces of paper and we'll walk around a building and etch different patterns into the paper and find faces in those patterns. Or they'll take string and throw it down on the paper and etch the pattern over the string and find a face in the pattern. The idea here is that they can find faces, they can find these sort of points of recognition in anything. And they then develop that into the matrix, which they've created from their face, from themselves. And they develop these masks. We then explore the different emotional states of these characters. And then the key thing is that you're looking at here is that they take them into the campus. So they find an environment in which to bring the masks and the relationship between 2 people to life. And this is, so why? Why not just keep this in HH 180 or in the Theatre of the Arts? And the reasons for doing this, in my way of thinking about it, is that I guess this is kind of a Kantian idea, that it gets us away from deterministic models of learning and more into models that are reflective and open to things that can happen on campus. The site becomes a kind of third performer in the duet. So the site and its inhabitants bring all kinds of offers, all kinds of input. The site tends to then make them think about politics, think about history, think about the kind of archaeological layers of place. And actually, I'll talk a bit about that later, but in the sense of a sort of Michel de Certeau concept that a space, as it becomes practiced, becomes a kind of place. So the places that they create performance in have a kind of resonance or a meaning to them that is unique to what they create there. One of the articles that we look at in this exercise is Mi-Won Kwan's Hong Kong Incorporated. And she talks about how Hong Kong is this place of constant exchange. It's a hub of market and shipping and fast transaction. And the way she describes Hong Kong reminds me of a university in the sense that people are moving through the university constantly. And there's this sort of a mercantile sense of education that gets delivered, and they move on to the next thing. And Mi-Won Kwan describes the Falun Gong movement in Hong Kong as being an alternative way of occupying space in Hong Kong through meditative stillness. So I get them to think about how their performances in different places are a disruption to the normal mode of exchange and activity that happens in this place. And I noticed that when they reflect on the time they spent in residence, for example, they think of the residence room that they lived in often as really identified by who they are, that they've decorated it a certain way and that they've lived there and it's become their place. But they would acknowledge that if they were to go back to those rooms, it's been completely erased and now it's someone else's. So there is this sense of they get how this place is a constant environment of flux and fluidity. So the site has all kinds of, the other thing that we look at is Marc Augé's non-places, and Marc Augé talks about a kind of super modernity and the idea that more and more of the places that we inhabit feel a little bit like airport lounges, so that we're kind of just moving through, we occupy them for a little bit, and then we keep moving through. And I think most university spaces are like that. So they're trying to challenge this notion of how we define these places. And right, and all of these sites can be read as text, that they're creating a kind of narrative knowledge about these different environments based on the way they animate them. And I think in some ways, and this is something that I'm sort of still in process and thinking about, but in some ways this is a challenge to their identity as they exist as drama students in the University of Waterloo. And I'm kind of working off of this, the way that drama students exist on the university campus is, I think in their opinion and in mine, mostly unmarked or not significantly acknowledged. So I wonder if these performances that happen throughout the campus are touching on some of the ideas that Jean-Luc Nancy's expressed in the Inoperative Community, which is a book he wrote in the mid-'80s, where he talks about the politics of appearance. And he's sort of challenging, he's presenting some challenging ideas about how spectacle is a way of articulating community. And he's critiquing Rousseau's notion of good spectacle, which is maybe in the university sense, orientation or homecoming, these spectacles that kind of unite us under the banner of the University of Waterloo. And he's also, he's articulating Guy Debord's Society of Spectacle, where the articulation there is that, to get away from social media or digital technologies, we're trying to find kind of ways of being live in space. And Nancy deconstructs that binary and talks about this idea of co-appearance, and that maybe community is created in these kind of events that happen where people find themselves face to face in peculiar spectacle performances, and they're incomplete and they're ephemeral, and they're a kind of challenge to who we are on campus. And I think what I get from my students journaling about these projects afterwards is that in this interesting kind of way, it allows them to place themselves in applied health or the math building or a biology building, and exist there performing a character, creating a spectacle, creating noise, interacting with the inhabitants of those spaces, getting them to understand what they're doing and why they're there, and creates a kind of interesting sense of we in those environments. So I think that's where I'm at with this work now, and I'm sort of thinking about how I want to kind of think about how that can be developed more in the teaching that I do. But anyway, I think is that too short? Okay.
Other people will have questions.
Yeah, sure. Awesome. Yeah, great. I don't know. That's where I'm at, I think. Do you have any questions? Yeah, Jay.
I was thinking about the new Nano building.
Yeah, I haven't been there yet. No, because I've been away.
A couple times, but the one thing that I was really noticeable, the way that I entered is kind of like a ramp up, and they have these walls that I guess you can write on with a razor board marker, which I thought was really remarkable.
Yeah. Yeah.
But because it's actually inviting students to make their mark, right?
Yeah.
And I just wonder, because that's the kind of that's not a it makes it not a non.
Yeah, sure.
Like so many other places on this campus are.
Yeah.
I just wonder about how do we create those ways for students, and this seems to be a way for students to make something into a place.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and I think students do that. Like that's a great idea to make it. Sure. Yeah. Or they find all kinds of ways to make these spaces of exchange particular and resonant to their own experiences. And I know, this is a kind of spectacular example of it, but in all kinds of more subtle ways they can do that. And it does become kind of another exercise that I do in a political theater class has to do with mapping and thinking about and really through the eyes of thinking about ideology. Oh, and I guess the other thing I didn't mention here, but there's a notion here of how this is a kind of disidentificational strategy. That in some ways you're really looking at how these buildings and the university identifies itself, and that's really about progress and higher knowledge and all the sort of things connected to the good spectacle. And this is not necessarily a way of opposing it, because all of these students want to succeed and want to create interesting things and be, lauded for that on some level. But it's a way of queering those spaces a little bit and making them their own, for their own kinds of memories. And in the mapping work that we do, they talk about how some of these projects have made them really remember a building or a place in a very different way. Like that forever the applied health, that's what this building is completely changed. And I could say also, this is a character of a young student who's trying to check her father into applied health for treatment. And so that was what they were getting from this space, that it felt very clinical and felt like a place where people were being examined for their mental health. Some of the other ones that you've seen, the first one in the tunnel under South Campus Hall was about a co-op position that was perverted by the person's, one of the character's intentions for what kind of co-op job was to be done. And I get that often from arts students, that the co-op jobs that they do tend to be demeaning on some level and not what the university promised them. So that was one thing that they were exploring. This performance, which happened in biology among these amazing taxidermied animals, is a student who is quite digital and quite defined by her being up with digital technologies, is going to break the news to an elderly professor that they're going to get rid of these taxidermied animals and put them on a digital format of some sort. So there, I mean, that's one interesting thing about that biology building in my mind, is it's a little bit of a relic from the past. And I think it's beautiful and amazing. There's something sort of, I don't know, sublime about these animals that are, and this is the professor. And we also played with coffee brands. He brings her Williams coffee and she has Tim Hortons. And he stands up for a sense of quality connected to the past, and she's completely with the fast pace of technology. So I wonder if students do this anyway, and then this is just a way of dramatizing it in a peculiar fashion. So.